that the mesial wall left over is super thin, but it's still preserved. Luckily, it did not fly away. Oftentimes, before it gets this thin, it will go away, and that's okay. But usually after it goes away, try to keep your burr usage to a minimum, or just be very, very, very careful. And that's probably a good time to start going back and forth, hand instruments and burrs. Okay, then, so this I have here is a hatchet 8 and 9, and these, this is like a multi-use, very, very handy hand instrument. So I want to put it, so same with the burr, I'm going to have to give a very firm finger rest, and this takes quite a bit of force. Like when you use it in a real patient's mouth, you know, kind of like when you do an extraction on the lower, you support the jaw so that it doesn't dislocate. Not as much force, but similar. You also have to support the lower jaw when you're using it at the lower. So you do have to put quite a bit of force on it while you work on it. Okay, so I'm gonna put the long wall of my instrument against the tooth. This is where I want to cut, right? And I'm gonna press straight down. There we go. So that took care of a lot of it all at once. The lingual is still there. It's still there as a lip, right? You don't want any of this at the end of the day. So I'm going to start with here now. So I switched over. I was using one side for the buckle. Now I switched over to the other side for the lingual. So that, again, the long end is resting against the wall. And I'm going to go straight down. So that's what it looks like after I just chopped off the two walls. And there's a photo of it underneath this video somewhere of this particular tooth I just took at this stage for your reference. Now I'm just going to refine it a little bit more, smooth out the walls a little bit more. On the buckle, pick up my Explorer. On the buckle, I feel it's less than smooth. On the lingual, it's very smooth. And the pulpal floor is very smooth. So I have some planing to do on the buckle wall. So again, this is my hatchet. Very firm finger rest, and I'm also holding down my typodont very, very firmly with these two fingers that you see right here. I'm holding it down super strong so that it doesn't move. Hand instruments can feel a little intimidating at first, but really they're like a knife kind of thing, and they cut very, very nicely. Okay, much better. At this point, I'm pretty happy with it, except that I just noticed that the gingival floor is a little narrower than I thought it would be. It's more like 1.1, and so you have two ways of going about this at this time. If you're tabletop, to widen the gingival floor, I would pick up the burr. If you're in a mannequin and if you can't get a very good view, you could attempt doing it with a hand instrument. And if you want to do that, you have a few ways. You could, your hatchet again, you could go down like this, and it really cuts well. See this tooth structure just chipping away. So yeah, just doing that until, or even going this way, or just going back in with a 56 is also good. I do this, I'm putting my force towards the distal, towards the axial wall, and not the pulpal floor, gingival floor itself, because I don't want to deepen my gingival, I just want to go in more, right? So even though I'm doing this, my force is on the distal. And the hatchet has 3 cutting blades. So this is the main cutting blade, but there are also blades on the sides of it, which come in very handy at times like this. You're basically just sculpting it away. Okay, after you're done with your hatchet, now it's time to pick up your mesial margin trimmer. The mesial is a 29, the distal is a 28. And if you're not sure, if you just kind of fit it in the box, you'll realize that one works and one doesn't work. So now it's time to pick up your MT29, and let's first plane, let's just first bevel the, the gingival floor. So really, it's not that big of a bevel. All you're trying to do is you're just trying to get rid of the unsupported enamel. And if you imagine if it's a real person, that person has enamel rods, right? So any unsupported enamel will, without too much force, just go away. And so basically, if you see here right now, let's see if you can see that very well, but areas like this, it's slightly rough, right? Right down on the floor. I'll circle it down in the photo. But there's that little area towards the lingual half that's a little rough. Those areas will disappear after you bevel it. But by bevel, it's not like, oh, it's much less than half a millimeter bevel, so it's a very small bevel. So it has 2 ends to it, right? And so one side will work lingual to buccal, and the other side will work buccal to lingual. It's very intuitive, so you'll know when you see it. Just scrape it along. Just scrape it along. There you go. Also, another place you need to excuse me. Also, another angle that you have to bevel. This one's more easier to forget. Please don't forget this. It's the pulpal axial line angle right here. You do not want a 90-degree angle. You want it smoothened out. So just go into the margin trimmer. Another thing I like to do with the margin trimmer is actually making sure that there's no unsupported enamel around all of the external line angles, especially around the box. So this is going to be even less evident than the bevels that I just gave, but just very slightly, very light pressured here. Just scrape it down. Scrape it down. Anything that's overhanging or whatever should fall with that. You could even use a hatchet for that, it doesn't matter. Here, do you see this area right here? See it? Right here. a little rough around this area, and I'm just going to smoothen that out with a hatchet as well. Very, very versatile. Keep on going around all of the external line angles and just lightly brush it. You're not beveling it per se, but you are getting rid of any possibility of unsupported enamel, which just kind of can look a little rough. Right now I'm using a distal margin trimmer. I just found that the angle of this works better, but really you can use anything for this. This looks a little skinny, doesn't it? I could pick up a hanky square, that's totally acceptable, but check this out now. See, this isthmus, I just realized it's a little more narrow than a millimeter, so I want to reduce it, right? I'm going to choose to reduce it from the lingual and not from the buccal. The reason being is that I want to keep this nice reverse S curve very visible, and if I take any more away from it, it will make it a little less pronounced. So, when you need to make those little adjustments, think about where you should make it from to give you the best results. Honestly, the reason I'm just doing it with a hand instrument is because my compressor's not on, but you can see that you can really do a lot with your hatchet. This is really good piece of instrument. Almost, yeah. It's slightly binding, but it's definitely visibly much wider. One last thing you can do before, calling it done would be to really defining all of the internal line angles one more time with your hand instruments. And for this, you could either use anything but a margin trimmer. Don't use something that's curved for it. It's just kind of weird. Let me pick up my thin angle chisel. I'm going to use my thin angle chisel. This is going to actually also smoothen out the pop-up floor a bit more too. But the way you use this one is you just push it. And right now I'm pushing it against all of the line angles, so it's defining it more. And you can see it's passing through the isthmus without a bind, which means that it has met the minimum 1 millimeter requirement. So that's one way of defining the angles. You can also use a hatchet for this. To use a hatchet, just go down from the walls to the pop-up floor, and just do that as you go. And this will greatly